The night 3i Atlas started talking, nobody at NASA was supposed to be listening. By the time they realized what they were hearing, the object had already changed its orbit in a way no comet should, and three people had quietly signed non-disclosure agreements they wished they'd never seen. If you stay with me to the end of this, you will never again look at a harmless space rock in a headline the same way. Because once you understand how it spoke, you're going to start wondering what else is already answering us and who decided not to tell you. They called it just Atlas in the control room, like it was a coworker on the night shift. Officially, it was 3i Atlas, the third confirmed interstellar object, a weird little body discovered by the Atlas survey in Hawaii, drifting through our system on a one-time, never-coming-back trajectory. By November 2025, most of the world had already forgotten it. The news cycle moved on. Big red graphics, dramatic animations, clickbait titles, all replaced by wars, elections, hurricanes. But in a windowless floor at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, Atlas was still on the schedule. It was on our schedule. My name is Daniel Harper. I'm not an astronaut. I'm not a celebrity scientist. I'm the kind of person you never see in documentaries. The guy in a hoodie at 3 in the morning staring at noisy graphs while a cleaning cart rattles by down the hallway. My specialty is photometry and signal analysis, turning faint dots of light into numbers and numbers into stories. Atlas was supposed to be a footnote in one of those stories. Instead, it rewrote the outline. The first weirdness wasn't the voice, it was the rhythm. We were piggybacking on a telescope in New Mexico, a modest one the public never hears about, using it during dead hours for a project we called, half-joking, Graveyard Shift SETI. The idea was simple enough. While other teams used the scope for asteroid tracking, we grabbed the in-between minutes and pointed it at objects nobody cared about anymore: dead comets, Trojan asteroids, interstellar rocks that had already passed their press tour prime. We weren't looking for green lights or Hollywood saucers. We were looking for patterns so boring only code could love them. Patterns too precise, too clean to be just ice and dust. That night, November 18th, the telescope was tracking Atlas on its outbound leg, about 2.1 astronomical units from the sun. Faint, cold, forgettable. I had a mug of lukewarm coffee, 3 open terminal windows, and a playlist looping quietly under the fan noise. Outside, Pasadena was asleep under a hazy marine layer. Inside, the only light came from the monitors and the blinking green LEDs on the rack units that sounded like a distant mechanical rain. We were running standard brightness time sampling on Atlas, 1 point every few seconds, looking for spin signatures, outgassing flares, anything we'd missed. I expected a slow, noisy curve I could file away and forget. Instead, I got steps. If you imagine a comet's brightness over time, it should look like a messy heartbeat: up, down, jitter, random spikes when dust jets fire. What Atlas gave us was a staircase. 4 discrete levels of brightness, switching between them sharply every 30 seconds or so, like someone was flicking a dimmer switch with exactly 4 stops. No smoothing, no natural rounding, just crisp jumps. Level 1, level 3, back to 2, up to 4, pause, down again. At first, I thought it was me. Bad calibration file, driver glitch, a saturated pixel. I reran the pipeline. Same staircase. I pushed my chair back and just listened for a second to the hum of the air conditioning, the soft tick of the wall clock. Then I did what every underpaid scientist does when they see something impossible at 3 a.m. I tried very, very hard to prove it was boring. I checked the guide star log. No tracking loss. I checked weather at the New Mexico site. Clear skies, low wind, no clouds sweeping across the field. I pulled up the raw frames, scrolling through them in grayscale. Atlas was a faint blob, but it was consistent. Exactly where it should be, no hot pixels dancing around it. I overlaid the photometric aperture and watched the counts per frame. The staircase was real. The comet, the interstellar comet, was blinking, but not like a lighthouse, not like a star occulted by debris. There was structure, and structure is where fear and curiosity hold hands. I paged Lena. Officially, Dr. Lena Ross was my supervisor. Unofficially, she was the only person I trusted at JPL more than my own eyes, and the only one willing to spend her nights on a project that could never show up in a funding proposal. Her voice on the phone was hoarse with sleep. "If this is another false positive from your graveyard zoo, Danny, I swear." I cut her off, not with data, but with the thing you never want to hear from someone like me. "It's discrete levels," I said. 4 states, 30-second cadence. It's quantized. There was a pause long enough for me to hear the distant siren of an ambulance out on Oak Grove Drive. Then she sighed. "Send me the stream. I'm coming in." 20 minutes later, she was in the lab in jeans and an old Caltech hoodie, hair pulled into a messy knot, eyes already locked on the screen as she dropped her bag onto an empty chair. She didn't bother with hello. She said, "Show me the unbinned data." She slid into my seat like she was taking over an aircraft. I stepped back, watching her face as she drilled through plots, histograms, noise models. The overhead fluorescence stayed dark. We kept the room in that submarine dim that makes monitors feel like windows. She murmured, "Could be rotation," more to herself than to me. Facets catching light, 4 dominant reflectivity zones. She zoomed in on a transition. Crisp 3-second rise, flat plateau, crisp drop. She corrected herself softly. "No, natural rotation wouldn't do that. You'd get curves." She glanced up at me then, and there was a look in her eyes I hadn't seen since grad school, since those youthful nights when we still entertained wild ideas out loud. "Did you run at periodogram?" I nodded. "Primary at 30.02 seconds. Harmonics at 15 and 60. It's like a clock." Here's the thing they don't tell you in documentaries. Scientists are not calm when the universe breaks a rule. There's excitement, sure, but underneath it is a very specific kind of dread, because every anomaly is either your mistake or your responsibility. If it's your mistake, your career takes a hit. If it's real, your life changes in ways you can't control. As Lena and I watched Atlas blink, 30 seconds on a cosmic metronome, I felt that dread settle into my chest like a cold stone. This was either a subtle, systematic error we hadn't thought of, or something out there was running a timer. We tried to kill it. That was our first instinct. We pulled archival data from 2 nights before, when a different team had done some last-minute astrometry on Atlas. I reran their frames with our pipeline. Noise, 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 and then, faintly, the same pattern, buried closer to the background because their exposures were shorter. 4 levels, 30 seconds. We checked a separate observatory, a private one in Arizona that sold time to universities. They'd grabbed Atlas a week earlier, more as a curiosity than anything. Their raw files showed it too, like a watermark underneath the comet's ordinary variability. The pattern had been there for at least a week. Nobody had noticed it because nobody had been looking for a message. "Don't say that word," Lena said when I finally let it slip. "Message?" It felt stupid as soon as I said it, like calling a dripping faucet a manifesto. "We don't have content," she added. "We have modulation, repeating modulation. That's it." She scrubbed her hands over her face, then pointed at the screen. "You want to convince me this is more than some exotic outgassing mode. Show me it's not just periodic." That was the first pivot. The first time the floor under my assumptions tilted. Because up to that moment, I'd been thinking about this in terms of regularity. Now I had to think in terms of information. Periodic noise is boring. Noise that changes is where things start to talk. I wrote a quick script to treat the 4 brightness levels as symbols, 0, 1, 2, 3. Every 30-second block became one symbol. Over 3 hours of data gave us 360 codes. I plotted them as a sequence and stared. To a tired human brain, almost anything looks like a pattern if you want it badly enough. But even through the fog, something jumped out. There were runs that never appeared, combinations missing that should have shown up by chance. Mark the transitions, Lena said quietly. Ignore the absolute levels. Just look at whether it goes up or down. So I did. Up, down, same. I compressed 3 hours of comet blinking into a string of arrows. Up, down, right. Then I calculated the entropy, a measure of randomness you usually apply to encryption or language. Natural outgassing, even constrained by rotation, should give you high entropy, nearly random ups and downs with a slight bias. Atlas's stream came in low, too low, like someone had written a children's book using only half the alphabet. That's when the first real spike of fear hit me. Not movie fear, not jump scare fear. The slow, physiological kind, the kind that tightens your throat and makes your hands feel suddenly too big. Because low-entropy sequences that still vary are designed. Someone chooses to use only certain combinations and avoid others. That's how you get syntax. That's how you get codes. This could still be physics, Lena said, but her voice had that brittle edge you hear when someone is trying to keep the walls up. She exhaled sharply. Fine. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that this is intentional modulation. What's the most obvious thing an impatient engineer would try? I smiled despite the twisting in my gut. Binary, I said. They'd try to find a way to turn this into ones and zeros. We spent the next hour doing exactly that. We mapped 2 of the brightness levels to 0 and 2 to 1, then rotated assignments. We compressed by time, treating pairs of symbols as bits. We tried differential encoding, where up means 1 and down means 0. Most of it produced white noise when run through basic tests, but one mapping, levels 0 and 1 as 0 and level 2 and 3 as 1, with transitions sampled every 60 seconds instead of 30, dropped the entropy even further. Not only that, but when I graphed the resulting bit stream in chunks of 8, something sickeningly familiar emerged. The frequency of certain 8-bit patterns matched the distribution you see in ASCII text. Not exact, not one-to-one, but close enough to make the hairs on my arms stand up. We don't know that, Lena said, staring at the histogram like it had personally offended her. 8-bit groupings are just a human convenience. We're projecting. But her hand was trembling on the mouse. Outside, dawn was still hours away. Inside, time had lost its usual smooth flow. Every 30 seconds, Atlas stepped to a new level, a metronome ticking just off the edge of our comprehension. At 4:13 a.m., the cleaning lady, Martha, pushed her cart past the open lab door and peered in. She'd seen us 100 times, hunched over screens, eyes red, expressions blank. Tonight, she paused. "You two look like you saw a ghost," she said. Lena forced a smile. "Something like that," she replied. "We're just arguing with a rock." Martha laughed, shook her head, and moved on. The normalcy of it, the squeak of the wheels, the faint lemon smell of cleaner, was a tiny island of sanity. Then the cart turned the corner, the sound faded, and we were back in the bubble with the blinking dot from another star. The first knockdown blow came just before 5. We pulled radio data. Not from a big dish, nobody was tracking Atlas on the Deep Space Network at that hour, but from a small SETI array in West Virginia that kept their receivers quietly pointed at interesting objects when nobody else was using the bandwidth. We had a friend there, Jason, who owed Lena 3 favors and a lot of credit for a paper he'd gotten his name on. He'd set their system to record wideband noise in Atlas's direction whenever they had downtime. It was a scientific equivalent of putting a baby monitor in an empty room and hoping for a sound. I downloaded a chunk of their raw radio data and ran a quick Fourier transform. At first glance, it was just static. Broadband hiss punctuated by the occasional spike from passing satellite. Then, buried deep, at a frequency band nobody sane would bother to look at, I saw comb teeth, equally spaced narrow-band spikes, like the notches in a gear. I zoomed in, subtracted the background, filtered out known terrestrial sources. The teeth remained. And the spacing between them corresponded to a period of course, 30 seconds. Atlas wasn't just blinking in visible light, it was ticking in radio. "That's it," Lena said softly. "That's 2 independent channels, optical and RF. Same period. No known natural mechanism gives you that in both bands at once." She looked at me, really looked. All the joking, all the academic skepticism stripped away. "If we publish this raw, it'll go nuclear. If we take it upstairs, it'll disappear." Her meaning was clear. There is a room in every institution where anomalies go to be quietly suffocated. A committee, a review board, a classified brief. We can't sit on it, and we can't drop it on archive with a smiley face. There has to be a middle path. That's when my phone buzzed. An unknown DC number. I stared at it. Nobody in Washington should have any idea what we were doing. We hadn't emailed outside JPL. We hadn't even written the word signal in the subject line. I answered anyway, because curiosity is our original sin.
The voice on the other end was calm, Midwestern, like a high school principal you don't want to disappoint. "Mr. Harper, this is Peter Doyle with the Office of Space Commerce. I'm sorry to bother you so early. I understand you and Dr. Ross are running an after-hours observational project involving 3I ATS. I didn't respond right away. The only sound in the lab was the low whine of the cooling fans and Lena's sharp inhale. "I'm not sure how that's relevant," I said carefully. "This is just a side analysis." "Of course," he interrupted smoothly, "and it's very valuable work. Look, I don't want to alarm you, but we've been monitoring Atlas as well through other channels. Some of the features you're seeing, let's just say they intersect with data that has certain classification guidelines." He let that hang in the air. "I'm going to need you to copy your raw and processed files to a secure server. I'll send the credentials. And I'm going to strongly advise you not to, speculate publicly until we've had a chance to coordinate." Lena shook her head violently, mouthing "no," her eyes blazing. I felt something else then, layered over the fear, anger, that quiet, hot kind that starts behind your ribs when you realize someone is trying to fold your life into their agenda. "With respect, Mr. Doyle," I said, "you're calling a basement lab at 4:30 in the morning about a side analysis you shouldn't even know exists. I think we passed not alarming about 5 minutes ago. If there's other data, we need it. Otherwise, we're blind, and you're asking us to hand over our only flashlight." There was a pause on the line, longer this time. When he spoke again, the principal tone was gone. "We've been observing non-gravitational accelerations on Atlas for 10 days, too smooth to be random outgassing. Vector changes that match, within error, what you'd expect from controlled thrust. 2 days ago, its projected path shifted by 19,000 kilometers in a direction inconsistent with any known natural jet model. Whatever it's doing with that 30-second cycle, it's not just talking, it's steering." Lena's hand found the back of my chair. I could feel her grip through the metal. The room seemed to tilt again, like someone had quietly rotated gravity. The blinking staircase on the screen, the comb teeth in the radio spectrum, the Washington voice talking about classification. It all fused into a single stark realization. Atlas wasn't just broadcasting a pattern into the void. It was listening to something, responding to something, maybe even aiming at something, and we were standing directly in the line between its silence and whatever came next.
If you're listening to this right now, do yourself a favor. Don't miss what will happen in a few minutes. Because the next thing Atlas did, it changed the definition of first contact. Hit subscribe so you don't wake up tomorrow and find out the world learned it without you. You don't get many choices at 5 in the morning when someone in Washington tells you the object you've been analyzing like an over-caffeinated grad student is actually maneuvering. Most people think a comet can't turn. They picture a frozen snowball tumbling in the dark, minding its business. And that's fair. That's how comets behave. But Atlas wasn't behaving. It was choosing. And every 30 seconds that choice ticked forward. Tick, tick, tick. Like a metronome marking time for something we weren't invited to understand. After Doyle's call ended, Lena and I just stood there, letting the silence settle like dust. She rubbed her temples, pacing between the racks of servers humming like restless insects, her sneaker soles whispering against the old linoleum. Steering, she repeated under her breath, like the word itself was toxic. They think it's steering. I should have been terrified. Actually, I was. But there was another feeling rising beneath the fear, something sharper, something that made me lean toward the screen instead of away from it. Awe. Because if Atlas was deliberate, if it was choosing its own path, then we weren't just watching an object anymore. We were watching an act, a decision, a message delivered not through language, but motion. And motion you can measure. Motion you can decode. We keep going, I said quietly. They can't tell us to stop analyzing raw physics. Lena froze mid-step, her eyes narrowing. Danny, if this goes classified, we could lose our jobs. Or worse, our data disappears, and we end up pretending we spent 6 months studying dust. They'll bury it. They always bury it. She wasn't wrong, but she was missing something. If they're scared of the public knowing, that means the public should know. The clock on the wall ticked a mechanical second. The next 30-second cycle from Atlas aligned perfectly with that tick, like it was keeping time with our room. I turned back to the keyboard. There's still something we haven't checked. The bit stream, our makeshift binary extraction, was just one angle. There was another domain mathematicians love: timing. If someone wanted to encode something using brightness only as the carrier, they might not put information in the levels, but in the timing between the levels. The cadence might not be 30 seconds. 30 seconds might just be the base unit. I grabbed the timestamp logs and ran a delta analysis. Actual spacing between brightness jumps: 30.00 seconds, 29.98, 30.03, 29.98, 30.01. Humans wouldn't notice that variation, but computers would. And so would anyone trying to use timing itself as a bit. I highlighted the pattern variation, and my breath caught. Variation wasn't random. High, low, low, high, high, low. It repeated every 5 minutes, a perfect loop inside the larger pattern. It's nested, I whispered. There's a pattern inside the pattern. Lena leaned over my shoulder, her hair brushing my sleeve. Her voice softened. Fear, yes, but also excitement. That's structured. That's controlled. That's... The lights flickered. Just once. A quick dip, like the building took a breath. We both froze. Because the timing of that flicker, it wasn't random. It fell exactly, precisely, stupidly perfectly on Atlas's next 30-second transition. Okay, I said, forcing a laugh I definitely didn't feel. That's just the grid. Coincidence. Power draw. Then the lights flickered again. Same interval, a second synchronous dip. This time, Lena grabbed my wrist hard enough to hurt. Danny, that's not us. On the monitor, Atlas stepped from brightness level 2 to level 3, right as the lights dimmed. Like something was syncing with it, resonating with it, listening to it, or worse, answering it. I'm not superstitious, but science has a rule. If something impossible happens twice, start measuring. I opened the building's energy logs. JPL, like everything government adjacent, logs every watt. A 5-millisecond voltage sag, repeated every 30.00 seconds, began at 5:02 a.m. and matched Atlas's cadence to 4 decimal places. A wave of cold rolled through me, the kind that doesn't come from fear, but realization. It's not talking to us, I whispered. It's talking through us. Because if Atlas was emitting periodic RF pulses and something inside our infrastructure, our grid, our wiring, our environment was echoing that timing, then we weren't just observers. We were part of the circuit. The next blow landed fast. My email pinged. Not Gmail, my NASA inbox. The message had no sender, no subject. One attachment, a single text file named "Do you understand what you are measuring?" Lena saw it too. "Don't open it," she warned, voice sharp. "It could be malware. It could—" "It's internal only," I said. "The network sandbox would quarantine anything malicious." But I wasn't saying that to her. I was saying it to myself. My pulse was loud enough to hear in my ears. I clicked. The file contained 3 lines. Timing is language. Language is timing. They didn't send a signal, they sent a rhythm. I stared at the words until the letters blurred. Lena whispered, "Who sent that?" I shook my head. Not Doyle. Too poetic. Too fast. And then I realized something that made my throat tighten. The timestamps in the file metadata weren't human. They were wrong. Written in a format used by radio telescope receivers, not email servers. Atlas's timing. Lena stepped back like the chair had just hissed at her. "Danny, are you telling me this came from—" "I'm telling you I don't know." To be honest, for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. The servers hummed, but the pitch felt unfamiliar, like when an engine shifts gears and you know something changed, even if you can't see it. I reopened the radio data. I wanted grounding, something measurable, something real. The comb teeth from earlier were still there, but now there was something new. A rise in amplitude every 5 minutes. Like a heartbeat. Like something accelerating. Like the object was powering up. "What if the cadence isn't a message?" Lena said quietly. "What if it's a handshake? A connection protocol?" "Who would it be connecting to?" I asked. She hesitated. "Earth." I felt my mouth go dry. It didn't make sense. Why Earth? Why us? Why now? But then again, why anything? I replayed the last hour in my head. The staircase pattern, the timing offsets, the RF comb, the energy dips, the anonymous message. The pieces didn't form a picture yet, but they formed a shape of intention. At 5:19:30 a.m., the world shifted again. The phone on the wall rang. Not my cell, the landline. The one that had never rung in the 3 years I'd worked in that lab. The ring was deep, metallic, an artifact of old hardware and older wiring. It echoed weirdly in the racks of servers, like the room exhaled each time it chimed. Lena walked toward it slowly, like approaching an animal you weren't sure was dead or sleeping. "Don't," I warned. She lifted the receiver. "JPL control room E29?" she said cautiously, and then her expression changed. Her shoulders locked, her pupils dilated. She didn't speak, didn't blink, just listened. For 5 long seconds. Then she lowered the receiver and set it back in its cradle with extreme care, like it was hot. "What did they say?" I asked. She shook her head once, slowly, staring at nothing. "It wasn't a person." I felt a chill crawl down my spine. "What do you mean?" She swallowed. It was the same cadence, 30-second cycle, but not in beeps, in tones, notes, like a dial tone that shifted. She took a shaky breath. Atlas called us. A rational part of my brain snapped like a rubber band. Phones aren't antennas, I said. No comet can patch into a landline. Then explain what I heard, she shot back, voice cracking. Before I could respond, the monitor flashed, the brightness stepped again, and the building lights dipped exactly one step later, echoing it, mirroring it, obeying it. Something was happening system-wide, something using the cadence, something riding Atlas's signal. We need to isolate the lab, kill the network, kill external power, run on internal battery. Too late. Every monitor in the room blinked. Not off, not on, just blinked. A synchronous pulse of white, soft like a camera flash behind glass. Atlas's next transition hit. Blink. Another flash, this one brighter. I grabbed the power strip on instinct and yanked. Sparks snapped from the metal housing. The screens stayed on, not connected to anything, not powered by anything obvious, still blinking, in sync. "This is impossible," I whispered. "The monitors aren't even—" "Danny?" Lena said suddenly, her voice small and distant. "Look." The brightness levels weren't 4 anymore. They were 6. Atlas had changed the codebook, evolved it, expanded its dictionary. And the cycle was accelerating. 30 seconds became 29.4, 29.2, 29. "It's pushing," I said. "Why? Toward what?" The anonymous text file still sat open. They didn't send a signal, they sent a rhythm. My throat tightened. My hands went cold. "Lena," I whispered, "what if the rhythm wasn't meant for us?" The servers crackled. The fluorescent lights buzzed with a rising hum. The entire building felt like a single tuning fork struck by a cosmic hand. And then, the lights went out. Total, absolute darkness. For one breath. 2. 3. Then, from every speaker, computer speakers, intercoms, even the cheap little piezo buzzers in the emergency alert system, a tone emerged. Not a beep, not static. A note. Low, calm, intentional. Followed by 4 more. 5 tones, the exact 5 Lena had heard on the phone. Not random, not noise, a sequence, a signature. The first words of a language older than ours, carried not in vocabulary, but vibration. Atlas wasn't sending a message, it was initiating contact. And we were no longer observers. We were the endpoint. The lab filled with a sudden, blinding return of light as the power snapped back and every monitor switched to a single line of text. We didn't type it, we didn't call it, we didn't conjure it, but it appeared. "Hello, Earth." It stayed for 3 seconds, then blinked away. Atlas's cadence resumed. 28.8 seconds, 28.2, 28.6. I turned to Lena. Her face was pale, eyes reflecting the glow like she was staring into the sun. "It spoke," she whispered. "It actually spoke." I shook my head. "No," I said, my voice trembling. "It hasn't spoken yet." The cadence quickened again. The tone shifted. The servers hummed louder. Something building, something preparing. "This," I said, breathless, "this is just the handshake." And then something even worse hit me. Worse than the contact, worse than the timing, worse than the fact that the building's electrical system had just answered a comet. The recognition landed like a punch to the chest. "Lena," I whispered, "Atlas is accelerating its cycle, but Earth's grid is syncing to it." She stared at me, horror blooming in her eyes. "Danny, are you saying—" "Yes," I said. "Something on Earth is syncing to it, not the other way around." Her voice cracked. "What could do that?" My answer came out before I could think. "Something that's been waiting." The lights flickered again, faster, brighter, the cadence rising like a countdown, or a heartbeat, or the sound of something waking up. If you don't want to miss what Atlas did next, what it activated next, hit subscribe right now. Because what happened next is where first contact stops being theory and becomes a location. When Atlas accelerated past the 28-second cycle, the building didn't just flicker anymore. It vibrated like something deep beneath the concrete was turning over in its sleep. The hum wasn't loud, but it was everywhere. The floor, the air, the metal legs of the workstations. Not threatening, not aggressive, just present. A presence we could feel in our bones. "It's sinking," Lena whispered, hugging her arms across her chest. "Danny, I think the grid's acting like an antenna." She wasn't wrong, but she wasn't going far enough. The grid wasn't just receiving, it was participating. Every screen flashed again, not white this time, amber. A warm, pulsing amber like a distant star caught behind clouds. The exact tone of Atlas's golden coma when it passed perihelion. A color nobody expected to see indoors, inside a locked lab in Pasadena. "It's mapping us," I said without meaning to say it out loud. "Through our infrastructure, through everything that carries current." And then another thought hit, heavy and unwelcome. If Atlas sends pulses into the grid, and the grid amplifies them, the entire continental power system could be acting like a resonant chamber, a megaphone, a bridge. "Why here? Why Earth? Why now?" Lena whispered, pacing like she was afraid to stand still. The hum deepened, a subsonic tremor that made the windows shiver in their frames. I turned back to the monitors. The cadence dipped to 28 seconds, 27.9, 27.8. A runaway acceleration curve. Nothing natural, nothing random. A countdown without numbers. A heartbeat accelerating towards something inevitable. I opened the radio data again. The comb pattern was still there, but now the spacing between the teeth was narrowing. That meant the carrier frequency was being compressed. And that meant one thing. The emitter, the source of the RF, was switching modes. "It's transitioning," I said, "like it's warming up." Lena spun. "Transitioning to what?" She barely finished the sentence when the emergency lamps in the hallway clicked on, flooding the edges of the room with harsh red light. That shouldn't have happened. We had normal power. The UPS wasn't supposed to kick in. But each lamp pulsed at the same rhythm as the monitors. Atlas. Something in the emergency systems was listening to the cadence signals and misinterpreting them as fault conditions. "We have to shut this down," Lena said. "Kill the breakers. If we kill power, we lose the data, we lose the handshake, we lose the connection." "And if we don't," she snapped, "we become the connection." A sudden three-tone chime sounded from the overhead speakers, a pattern that didn't belong to any fire alarm, any test drill, any JPL system I'd ever heard. Then an automated voice spoke, flat and cold. "Protocol 7, in effect. Secure all terminals. Await instructions." I felt something cold slide down my spine. "Protocol 7, I whispered. "We don't even have a Protocol 7. "Exactly. That message wasn't from us." The hum grew louder, like the air pressure was shifting, pushing against the walls. The servers rattled. And then the main console, the one that was showing our brightness graphs, cleared itself and replaced the window with an image. A live image. Of Atlas. Not from our telescope. Not from ground observations. This was space-level resolution. A close-range feed. High definition. Impossible. "Where's this coming from?" Lena breathed. Atlas filled the screen like an amber ember floating in black water. The coma rippled with subtle filaments, each glowing softly in rhythmic pulses, as if the whole object was breathing in time with the cadence. 27.5 seconds. The image zoomed in without us touching anything. The nucleus, Atlas's nucleus, came into focus. It looked cracked. Not chaotic, not shattered. Cracked like a seed. A seam glowed along its spine, thin at first, then brightening with each pulse. "It's opening," I whispered. Another chime rang through the speakers. 5 tones, the same signature as before.
And then the voice returned. Not synthetic, not automated. Calm, precise. Stand by. The words were in English, but they felt translated, like someone or something was shaping them one syllable at a time, adjusting tone and cadence as it learned. "Danny," Lena said, stepping closer to me. Her voice trembled. "We're not supposed to hear this. This isn't a broadcast. This is a direct line." The seam in the nucleus widened. Amber light spilled out, sweeping across the screen like a sunrise inside the object. The cycle accelerated. 27 seconds, 26.8, 26.5. "Why does it keep speeding up?" Lena whispered. "Because it's waiting for something," I said.
Something on our end. And then, as if triggered by the recognition itself, every device in the lab, phones, laptops, sensors, even unplugged ones, buzzed simultaneously. One notification. Same message. Hello again. The words felt impossible, too simple, too intentional, too aware. Did it send that? Lena said. Or did something on Earth forward it? I didn't know, but I knew the cadence was reaching a threshold. I could feel it in my chest like a second pulse. Maybe this is how they bootstrap communication. Start with timing, synchronize two systems, then exchange capacity, then initiate linguistic scaffolding using I never finished. Because something new appeared on the screen. A diagram, not a picture, a symbol. 5 circles, arranged not randomly, but precisely. A constellation pattern, but not one from Earth's sky. "Coordinates," I said. "Star map." "Can you identify it?" Lena asked. I shook my head, not without running a match against a stellar catalog. But then something hit me. "Wait, the circles aren't stars," I said. "They're nodes." "Nodes of what?" "Relay points," I said. "Relay positions. It's showing us a route." The symbol pulsed once, then again, with the cadence. 25 seconds, 25.9. It wasn't just a greeting. It wasn't just acknowledgement. It was a request. "It wants us to respond," I whispered. "How?" "Timing," I said. "We can answer with timing." I reached for the optical encoder on our table, the one we use to calibrate the photometry gear. If I could modulate a light at the right frequency and point it out the narrow rooftop port. "Danny," Lena said sharply, "we can't respond." "If we don't, we break the handshake." "Good," she snapped. "Break it. Sever it. Whatever's happening, it's too big." "If we break it, it might try again, harder." She opened her mouth, then closed it. She knew I was right. Atlas wasn't threatening us. It was anticipating us. I powered up the encoder. A thin, sharp LED beam cast a faint blue line across the table. I set the pulse frequency to match Atlas's cadence, 25.8 seconds. Then I adjusted it slightly, 25.82. A deviation, a signature, a reply. If it understands, it will mirror the deviation. My finger hovered over the transmit button. The hum deepened again, almost like the building leaned in. I sent the pulse. The LED flicked once, barely visible. We waited. 25 seconds. 25.5, 25.8, 25.82. The monitors flashed, not amber, pure white, and Atlas stepped down its brightness by exactly the same deviation, 25.82. "It heard us," I breathed. "It's acknowledging the adjustment." The symbol on screen changed. The 5 circles rearranged themselves into a new pattern. This one, recognizable. A pentagon, except the center was highlighted, glowing, a 6th point forming inside the shape. "What does that mean?" Lena asked. My throat tightened. "I think it's adding us. It's adding Earth to the network." The hum shifted upward in pitch. The building lights flickered faster. 25.7 seconds. 25.6. This wasn't a countdown anymore. It was a connection rate, a bandwidth ramping up. "We can't let it do this," Lena said. "Danny, we don't know what happens if it completes." If we stop it, we might be stopping communication between civilizations. She shook her head. Or we might be letting something integrate with our entire power grid. The word integrate landed like a weight, and it was too late anyway. The cadence reached 25 seconds, and everything, lights, screens, speakers, phone servers, locked, in perfect synchronicity. Not following Atlas, matching it. My heart thudded painfully. "Danny," I whispered, "I think it just phased us in." The image shifted again. A final symbol appeared. A waveform. Not random, not noise. Structured. Complex. Fast. It wasn't using 30-second cycles anymore, or 25, or anything human scale. It was using full spectrum transmission. Atlas had opened. The connection was complete. The speakers crackled. Not static, not tones. Voice. A voice shaped not by lungs or throat, but by algorithms, learning in real time how to place syllables. "Earth," it said. "Return signal. Accepted." My breath caught. Lena's hand shook where it gripped the desk. The voice continued. "Query. Are you prepared?" The room felt impossibly small. "Prepared for what?" I whispered. The voice responded without hesitation. "Integration." And then, before either of us could react, before we could speak, before we could even decide, the entire screen filled with a single phrase rendered in bright, impossible white. "Prepare your node." Then the feed cut to black. The cadence stopped, the hum died, and Atlas fell silent. "Danny, what did we just connect to?" I didn't have an answer, but I did know one thing with absolute certainty. Atlas hadn't stopped talking. It had just shifted channels. When Atlas went silent, the silence wasn't relief. It was pressure, like the air itself was listening, waiting for the next instruction. The hum that had been rattling the lights a minute ago was gone, but the absence of it felt wrong, like a missing heartbeat. Machines don't usually feel alive, but suddenly every monitor, every server, every panel in Lab E29 felt like an animal that had stopped breathing mid-stride. Lena backed away from the console, her hands shaking. "Danny, what does prepare your node even mean?" I wanted to answer. I wanted to say something reassuring, something rational, something scientific, but my mind was stuck on one thought with the jagged edge of a broken bottle. It didn't mean prepare your world. It didn't mean prepare your species. It meant prepare your node. Earth wasn't being addressed as a civilization. Earth was being addressed as a component, a module, a unit, a piece. The kind of thing you plug into something larger and wait for it to assimilate. "Danny," Lena said again, her voice cracking. "Look, the monitors, which had gone dead black when the Atlas link cut, flickered back on. Not with text, not with the live feed, but with something that looked like a diagnostic interface. Not ours, not from any software, OS, or hardware we had ever seen. Lines of symbols scrolled too fast to read, like the world's fastest BIOS screen. But here's the part that made my skin go cold. Every line began with a timestamp. Our timestamp. Pacific Standard Time. Our system wasn't displaying these logs, it was generating them. A new line appeared. Node 6, standby mode complete. Next phase, pending. "Node 6, Lena whispered. "That's us. It added us. It's treating Earth as Node 6. My mouth dried. "How many are there?" "5 other nodes," she said. "5 before us." She swallowed. "Danny, that diagram it showed, those circles," I finished. "They weren't stars. They were other nodes." The air suddenly felt too thin, as if the room had climbed 10,000 feet in the last 10 seconds. Across the lab, one of the wall-mounted emergency radios crackled to life, even though nobody had touched it in years. A voice human time cut through the static. This is an internal security directive, effective immediately. All teams are to power down non-essential systems and remain in place. Do not engage with anomalous signals. Repeat, do not engage with anomalous signals. The voice sounded strained, like the speaker was reading the script reluctantly or under pressure. Lena let out a bitter laugh. A little late for that. Before I could respond, the room lights flickered, not with Atlas's rhythm, but with something slower, heavier, a long, low pulse. Then another. The temperature dropped a few degrees, a cold that didn't feel environmental but electrical, the kind that creeps from the wires in the walls. Something was happening underground, deep. The entire building seemed to respond to it. "Danny, we need to get out of here."
She grabbed her bag, slung it over her shoulder, then hesitated. If this, whatever this is, spreads into the wider grid, then it won't matter if we leave the building, I said quietly. It'll reach everything. I didn't want that to be true, but it was obvious. Whatever Atlas triggered wasn't localized to our lab. It was bleeding outward into the infrastructure like dye spreading across paper. Gear, I said. We take the drives, all of them. If someone wanted to bury this, the only leverage we had was the raw data. Proof of the handshake, the cadence, the network map. Proof that we hadn't hallucinated the first contact. We yanked the portable drives free, shoving them into backpacks, pockets, even under jackets. That's when the stairwell door slammed open. A man we'd never seen before stepped inside. Tall, black windbreaker, a badge that wasn't NASA or JPL. He scanned the room with sharp, predatory eyes. "Daniel Harper, Dr. Ross, step away from the equipment." His voice was calm, controlled, too controlled. "Who are you?" Lena demanded. He didn't answer. Instead, he spoke into a small clipped radio. "I've secured them." "Yes." "They initiated handshake?" "Yes." "It completed." My blood ran cold. How did they know already? How were they here? The man noticed the hard drives bulging in my pockets. "Put the data on the table." "Under what authority?" I said, shaking with anger and adrenaline. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a printed authorization form. Government, high level. But my eyes froze on the top line. CLA classification red notice, Node 6 event. "Who told you that designation?" I said quietly. "Node 6. He didn't blink. "We've been monitoring the chain since Node 3. My heart hammered. "You knew?" He didn't answer, but that told me enough. They knew about nodes 1 through 5. They knew something had happened before Atlas ever entered our system. They'd kept that buried so deep, even most of NASA didn't know. "Put the drives on the table," he repeated. Lena squared her shoulders, stepped between him and me. "You can't classify a message addressed to the entire planet." "This wasn't addressed to the planet. It was addressed to you." The overhead lights flickered again, the slower pulse, deep, rhythmic. The man glanced up, annoyed. Then something happened I will never forget. Every device in the room, phones, monitors, radios, even the unplugged ones, chimed twice. Not Atlas's cadence, not ours, something else. A sync point, a handshake trigger, a confirmation signal. Node 6, confirmation received. I felt the words before I read them, like a pressure behind my eyes. The man's face drained of color. "Oh God," he whispered. "It already tagged you." "Tagged?" Lena repeated. "What does that mean?" He didn't answer, because he didn't have to. The overhead lights snapped off. The emergency lights flared red. Then a low-frequency tone rolled through the building like a wave passing through the foundation. The floor shook, not violently, just enough to feel like something massive had shifted somewhere below us. "We need to leave," he said sharply, "now." Before the tone hit again,
cutting him off. A vibration deep enough to make my teeth ache. The intercom crackled and a voice, unfamiliar, monotone, half machine, spoke, "Node 6. Link established." A beam of pure white light shot down from the ceiling. No bulb, no fixture, just a 6-inch column of impossibly bright, impossibly focused illumination hanging in the air like a physical object. It cast no shadows, it had no source. It was just there. The man raised an arm to shield his face. "Don't step into it. Don't even touch the air near it." Lena stared, breathless. "What is it?" The man's voice cracked. "It's the interface." "Interface with what?" I whispered. He swallowed. "Whatever Atlas belongs to." The light pulsed. Once, twice, 3 times. The monitors lit again. New message received. Display? The man lunged for the power kill switch on the wall, but the switch exploded in a burst of sparks before he could touch it. This wasn't just software. This wasn't just signals. This was control. Whatever was on the other end of that handshake, it wasn't waiting for permission anymore. I stepped closer to the screen. "Danny," Lena warned me, her voice breaking, "don't even think about stepping into that thing." "If it wants to speak," I said softly, "it's going to speak whether we read it or not." I hit enter. The screen filled with text, but not English, not symbols, something else. A block of compressed information, like a file header or handshake confirmation. Then it changed, resolved, translated. First contact acknowledged. Sequence, phase 2. Then, do not fear, we have been here before. Lena gasped. "What does that mean?" The screen shifted again, a history, a timeline. Not years, not dates, just intervals between node activations. Node 1 activated 482 years ago. Node 2, 241 years ago. Node 3, 120 years ago. Node 4, 60. Node 5, 30. Each interval halved. A geometric progression, a countdown across centuries. "It's accelerating," I whispered. "It's exponential." "Why?" Lena said. "What are they counting down to?" The man in the windbreaker whispered the answer like he was saying the name of something forbidden. Integration. A new line appeared. Node 6, activation, now. Then the screen flickered and went black. The column of white light widened. It now reached from floor to ceiling, humming with a sound that felt like it was inside my bones. The man grabbed my arm. "Don't move. It's scanning. You don't want to trigger." But he didn't get to finish. The beam flared, just once. A blinding, silent detonation of light. When my vision cleared, the man was gone. Not vaporized, not disintegrated. Just gone. Like he'd been erased from the room, from the moment, from the world. Lena screamed. The white beam narrowed again, returning to its static column. Then the intercom spoke one more time in that calm, impossible voice shaped by algorithms learning in real time. "Removal of obstruction complete. Node 6. Proceed." My knees felt weak. My breath came in short bursts. I whispered, "It wants us. It wants us specifically." Lena grabbed my shoulders, shaking me. "Danny, don't even think about stepping into that thing." "We made contact," I said. "We answered. We're the endpoint." "We're not endpoints," she snapped. "We're not nodes. We're people." The intercom spoke again, sharper now. "Impatience detected. Interface will reposition." A rising hum filled the ceiling. The beam flickered, moved, leaned toward us like a searching eye. "Run," I said. "Run now."
We bolted for the stairwell door. The beam swept across the room, not fast, but precise, scanning each surface, each shadow. When we reached the door, I swiped my badge. Denied. I swiped again. Denied. The beam neared. The hum grew louder. My chest tightened. Then, faintly, barely audible above the electrical roar, something new appeared. A second signal. A counter cadence. From outside the building, a different rhythm, higher, faster, jittering like static. The beam froze. The intercom voice glitched, a robotic stutter twisting syllables into metallic scraps. Interference. Unknown source. Unauthorized node activity. Lena clutched my arm, nails digging in.
Danny, that's not part of the network. I opened my mouth to answer, but the lights exploded, literally burst, glass raining down in glinting shards as the entire room went dark except for that frozen, trembling pillar of white. Then another light appeared, not inside the room, outside. A blue shimmer spread across the window like frost, crackling outward in geometric patterns, not random fractals, intentional structures. The hum returned, not from Atlas's beam this time, but from the blue lattice outside, a frequency higher than human hearing, but low enough to vibrate the inside of my skull. Two signals, two entities, two intelligences, and we were the ground between them. The intercom snapped back to life, Atlas's voice now warped, strained like it was speaking through static. Node 6, stand down. External hostile. The blue lattice outside pulsed once, and the hum spiked so sharply I tasted metal. Then a new voice filled the room, not human, not machine, something between whisper and distortion, as if someone had taken a human voice and stretched it thin like taffy. Node 6, do not accept integration. The words hit like a physical blow. Oh my God, Lena breathed. They're fighting over us. Before I could respond, the building shuddered violently, harder than any California quake I'd ever felt. Monitors toppled. The white beam convulsed, widened, then snapped into a narrow lance of light firing upward through the ceiling like a spear. The voice of Atlas roared, hostile node detected, purging threat. Then the blue lattice outside erupted in a blinding flash that turned the entire sky cobalt. The air filled with a deafening crackle that sounded like someone ripping reality in half. The man who'd vanished earlier, the one erased by the beam, flashed through my mind. If these entities could remove a person that easily, what would they do to each other and to us? The white beam surged downward, sweeping across consoles like a scanning laser, slicing through servers as if they were made of fabric. No heat, no fire, just annihilation. The machines dissolved into fine dust that fell like snow. The blue lattice outside retaliated. A bolt of blue energy, if energy is even the right word, shot through the window without breaking it, passing through the glass like it wasn't there, and slamming into the white beam. The impact made the entire building groan like a sinking ship. The two beams pushed against each other, white and blue, clashing like opposing magnets. The air tasted like ozone and copper, and something sweet, sickly sweet, like burnt sugar. Lena screamed and pulled me to the floor, just as the beams detonated into a shockwave that shattered every remaining panel of glass. The room flashed black, then red, then white. My ears rang so hard I couldn't hear my own breathing. When my vision staggered back, the lab looked like the inside of a broken circuit board. Shards of metal, wires, dust that used to be equipment. The white beam flickered weakly, dimming like a dying star. The blue lattice outside flickered too, collapsing into broken shards of light that dissolved into the night. Something had hit something. Something had won something. But which one? And what did winning even mean to them? The intercom crackled again. Atlas's voice returned, but weaker than before. Each syllable clipped, strained. Node 6. Hold position. External node disabled. Then the second voice, the blue one, slipped through the static like breath against cold glass. "It is lying. Do not complete." The white beam suddenly narrowed and shot downward toward us, not randomly, directly at me. Lena shoved me aside, and the beam scorched the floor where I had been standing. No fire, no mark, just a sound like the sigh of a glacier cracking. It repositioned and aimed at me again. "Danny, move!" Lena cried, dragging me behind an overturned workstation. The beam stabbed into the metal frame. The desk evaporated into particles. Node 6. You were selected. Full integration required. The blue voice cut in. "It wants control of your species. You are not a node." Lena grabbed my face with shaking hands. "Do not listen. Danny, look at me. Do not listen to either of them." But Lena didn't understand. Or maybe she did and didn't want to face it. This wasn't an argument over instructions. This was a territory dispute. And Earth was the territory. Another blast of blue light tore through the window, slicing into the white beam. The two energies collided again, forming a sphere of vibrating air that hummed like a swarm of angry wasps. The walls shook. The ceiling buckled. Dust rained down in sheets. The floor heaved beneath us. The forces weren't just colliding, they were destabilizing the very space around them. Lena coughed, struggling to breathe. "Danny, if they tear each other apart, we're in the crossfire." I grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the back of the lab, where a service hatch led to a maintenance stairwell. We stumbled over debris, ducking as another blue bolt ripped through a cabinet inches above our heads. The white beam tracked us relentlessly, pulsing with growing fury. "Node 6, return immediately." The blue voice whispered, "Run." I wrenched the hatch open and shoved Lena inside. As I turned to follow, something bright flared in the corner of my vision. The white beam had elongated into a tendril reaching for me like a hand. It wrapped around my wrist before I could react. Pain unlike anything I ever felt tore through my arm, a sensation not of burning or crushing, but of being rewritten, pixel by pixel. I screamed and fell to my knees. Lena grabbed my other arm, pulling with everything she had, tears streaming down her face. "Let him go!" she screamed. The blue light outside surged inward, slamming into the white tendril wrapping my wrist. The impact ripped through me like an electrical storm, and the world went white. For a moment, I felt weightless, disconnected, suspended between the two forces like a wire stretched between towers. And in that moment, I heard both voices at once, not through speakers, not through air, but inside my mind. "Atlas, you are the correct port. The blue entity, you are the correct bait." And then, in a single sickening snap, the white tendril and the blue bolt tore away from each other, ripping something inside me loose. I hit the floor hard, gasping. The white beam shrank into a pinpoint and collapsed into nothing. The blue lattice outside shattered into sparks that dissolved into the air. Something had hit something. Something had won something. But which one? And what did winning even mean to them? The intercom crackled again. Atlas's voice returned, but weaker than before. Each syllable clipped, strained. "Node 6, activation confirmed." And behind it, faint, distant, like a voice calling from the edge of the universe, "More are coming." The building lights flickered, once, twice, then went dark, and the cadence inside my mind kept pulsing, steady, patient, waiting. The story ends here, but the signal doesn't.